So I'm trying to work out where my confusion stems from, and then ask you a question that would hopefully answer it for people in the same position as myself. Because I kind of figured if I'm confused, then I can't be the only person.
You're not.
And I think I'm a reasonably intelligent person, so I should be able
to
get my hands around it. So I mean, Adventures League is the latest incarnation of Russ's organised play program.
Yep.
And organised play, as I understand it, and you can correct me if I get this wrong, is organised game events which take place in game stores around the country and around the world, which in some way interlink with each other. That bit I'm not so clear on.
Yes, so organised play can be a couple of different things.
Right.
Because various companies run these programs. And what it is sort of depends on what they're trying to achieve with the program.
Right.
In its earliest form, it's just purely some sort of organized play format. We create a program so that you can come together, create a community together, and play.
Right.
And in the early days, that was the RPGA, the Role-Playing Gamers Association, which just come together and they would play, and they would just, they'd have networks and clubs, and you'd say, oh, I'm in Illinois, in the state of Illinois, and I want to play together, and you'd join everybody at a club gathering at some hotel room and play. And it sort of really did a lot for conventions as well.
Sure.
Right? As time has progressed, it's become a lot about stores, because that's one of the keys to the hobby and to revenue and having a healthy hobby itself, right? So then they say, well, we don't just want people playing at their homes or wherever, but we do want to help that to some extent. But the store is a key aspect, and so you see more and more companies that try to further in-store play.
Right. So what? Say I turned up at a store and I'm interested in getting involved in the D&D Adventures League. So I turn up at a store for the first time. I have no idea what it is, and I'm walking through the door. What would I expect to see? What would happen?
It's going to vary by store. Sometimes the stores are confused.
All right.
But hopefully what happens is that you walk in and you kind of say either what's that, or you say, I would like to play some D&D regularly, and I don't know how to get started. And in the old days, you would have probably put your name with a pin in it somewhere and say, I want to play D&D or something. Yeah. But now, hopefully, you say, oh, D&D Adventures League. I know there's a new edition. What's that about? And they would say, every Wednesday, we run the Encounters program. It's about an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, where we're going to play through this adventure. And they'd pull it off the shelf, which is what, Horde of the Dragon Queen right here.
Sure.
And they'd say, we're going to play the first 4 levels of this. And if you walk in on that day, you get to play. And there'll be other people here. We'll have a DM for you. We've arranged. It's all set up. Right. And you go, great. It doesn't matter that I have 2 kids or that I work a busy job. I can come here Wednesday. So it's a lot like playing Friday Night Magic or some other form of in-store play. You just show up and you play, roll some dice. And that's been really successful. The Encounters program started back several years now. It's 5 years or more. And people would come in to the store that I would participate with.
Yeah.
And all walks of life. Some folks would say, here I am to play 4th edition. Last time I played was 1st edition. I just want to play a bit more.
Sure.
Or someone would say, it's my very first time. I heard about this role-playing game stuff.
So I understand there's a sort of, is there a shared world element to it? I know there's a shared storyline element. Like Wizards currently have their Tyranny of Dragons, and they've got their, Princes of the Apocalypse next year, something like that. What are these storylines, and how do they fit into the organized play?
So for D&D and the Adventures League, the way it works is there is an overall broad story theme that exists, the Tyranny of Dragons.
Sure.
And that runs for various months. So this one runs through the end of, or mid-March. So Tyranny of Dragons is taking place. We know that Tiamat's involved, the Cult of the Dragon, and there's really cool adventures. So on the shelf is one adventure, actually 2 parts, that you can buy.
Yeah.
And you can play it at home and go all the way to 20th level. So the full D&D experience. And you can actually make that be part of the D&D Adventures League. And the nice part of that is you can go online and communicate with others, and it's the shared experience, and you have kind of shared items that you've earned, and treasure and wealth, and you can have that nice experience as part of just that. You could also go to the store, and you could play that, right? And going to the store, now you'd have different people coming in at your table. One session you can't make it, the next session someone else can, but you all are still playing the same storyline, so you were able to continue with that story, right? You get that feeling of progression. Because you're tracking what you get, there's some kind of legal standing behind it, some rules that guide you. So I'm not just at my table going to say that you get to get a beholder mount.
Right, yeah.
Because we have rules for that,
That
right?
sounds awesome.
It is awesome. Great with kids.
Yeah.
So you get through this. So this program is something sort of reliable to you, right? It's got a tangible feel. It's got a connection to other people, and it progresses over time. And then the next aspect that exists is something that's called expeditions. And expeditions is what's called a living campaign,
Right.
and it's all part of the Adventures League. So with expeditions, you have usually 4-hour adventures. So there are some shorter ones, like 1 hour, that provide you a sort of chapter or episode in an overall story that's taking place in one part in the Forgotten Realms, which is called the Moonsea. And so along this area that's filled with danger, you're slowly learning about your town of Flan, where you start, about the surrounding region, about the threats, and uncovering those plots. So at this convention, we learned that the cult of the dragons behind a lot of these things. We learned a little bit about things they're gathering, machinations they're setting into play. We learned about 2 entities that exist in the town that are not really evil, but maybe they're on one side or the other, and can become big factors over time. Sort of a rebellion group, and then an arm of the sort of guard that protects the Moonsea. So that's kind of neat, right? So as you're playing expeditions, you get these episodes like in a TV show, where you're kind of going, oh, where's this going to go?
So do those expeditions link in, though, to the Tyranny of Dragons storyline? Is that all part of the same?
It is all part of Tyranny of Dragons. So the cult of the dragon is there, the possible return of Tiamat, all these kinds of elements are in play as a sort of story overlay. You can play both. Depending on what you're doing, you can mix characters even. So you could play part of Horde of the Dragon Queen, say through encounters, then go on, you could play some expeditions adventures with the same character.
Sure.
Or you could keep separate characters, have multiple characters, and go through all 1 through 20th with Horde of the Dragon Queen, play expeditions.
I've heard that it's supposed to be possible to sort of begin playing an adventure in one location, and then move across the country and carry on from where you left off somewhere else. Now, how does that work? How can you do that without?
Well, so you have these tracking sheets,
right?
So you're marking off your progression. So you're saying, oh, I played the first chapter of even the starter set, because the starter set's part of it. So you can say, I played the first chapter of the starter set. I need to play the second chapter. So you travel to another place across the country, or to the UK, whatever.
Someone running that chapter, sure. And is there some kind of, I don't know, I don't even know what words I would use, some kind of way to ensure that people aren't saying, hey, I picked up this amazing sword at my last game, yeah, I've got it honest. How would you handle something like that?
So there are a couple of things. There's a log sheet where you track what you earn, how much XP, gold, something called renown, which is how your factions know value. We can talk about factions. And then treasure, right? I got a sword +1.
Sure.
Awesome. In addition, if you play at an official location, so a store, convention, you then receive the actual certificate that says +1 sword, and it's got a signature on it, and that now becomes a tradable item. Not only do you have it, but you have the ability to swap it with another player's certificate.
Right, okay.
So it becomes a form of currency and another part of the community engagement. I have +1 armor, but I'm a monk. But I really like,
So if I actually want to give you my sword, I actually physically give you the certificate, and whoever has the certificate has the sword.
And I have to have a certificate as well, so we have to do a swap.
Oh, I can't just hand one straight to you. Right,
exactly.
Okay.
And there are reasons for that, which are convoluted, but it's basically to maintain that the economy, it's just like in a video game, right? Like the economy can go crazy if you're not careful about it. So in that same way, you have to make sure that you keep things sort of fair and honest and limit too much gathering in one place.
So presumably a given GM in a store is the person responsible for handing out those certificates. I presume he's limited in some way in how many, he can't just give me 10.
There's one.
Right, he's got one and he can give it out and that's it.
Yeah, if chapter 1 of the adventure happens to have, boots of striding and springing, you've got that one certificate or that one mention in the adventure and one player gets it, and that's it.
But presumably if he has multiple copies of the adventure, you could...
But with one character you can only play a part of the adventure once.
Right, I see.
So I can't play and gather all the items, If there are 2 items, I'm only, if I'm lucky, going to get one of them.
Sure, cool.
And that also keeps the mystery, right? It's not like it's just a magic mark where you're just loaded up with all the power in the world, slowly uncovering neat stuff.
I think this is becoming clearer now.
Good.
See, no, this is what I needed, someone to just sit down and... Because you've tried to explain on Twitter, haven't you, to me?
I have.
And to be honest, Twitter's not the medium to do that. 140 characters just doesn't get that across.
Yeah.
But, this conversation just really helps crystallise that in my mind.
Good.
You mentioned factions earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what a faction is in terms of sort of various computer games and stuff.
Yeah.
Is it the same sort of thing?
It is that sort of system. So factions have been around in organized play in various forms for a while. There have been different campaigns that have experimented with them, and so we've again come to a faction system.
Right.
And what takes place is when you start being an adventurer, you can choose or quickly find an organization that appeals to you and join it. And the factions are typical Forgotten Realms groups like the Harpers, the Zentarum, so very opposite ends of the coin.
Sure.
The Zentarum in the past has been evil and has these kind of very self-serving motivations. The Lord's Alliance, the Order of the Gauntlets, you have sort of religious group, you have a mercantile group, you have the Emerald Enclave, who are sort of a green group that wants to protect nature and keep things in balance. So by joining that organization, you can now interact with entities in the adventures in special ways. Right. So you meet this druid of the Emerald Enclave, you're an Emerald Enclave monk, you have a way to interact, right?
Sure, okay.
So it's a nice way that at the table when you have new players, you have something for them to grasp and react to and feed off of. Over time, you gain renown in your organization. When you play, the DM will say you earned a point of renown because you did that one thing that pleased this group. So now you're going up in levels. That earns you recognition. It also means that you are able to get certain rewards. So there's a whole table of rewards that you get as you progress up in levels of renown. So that notoriety is kind of neat. It's another thing you earn, just like XP or level, and you kind of get excited, like, oh, now I have this. There's even an apprenticeship program where you can take other players under your wing, so it's kind of neat.
Cool. So are some of the factions more popular than others, or are they all fairly?
Yeah, we saw that at the Epics. We can talk about Epics too, but
Sure,
at the Epic event, we got a little bit of a measure, and there were a lot of Harpers, which is not shocking. They're a traditional power group in the realms, and then a lot of Zentarum.
Which are the evil ones.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there weren't enough Emerald Enclave, and I'm playing an Emerald Enclave PC,
Right.
so we'll need some.
You know, if you'd asked me, I'd have said that's what would have happened. You know? I could have predicted that. So the epics.
Yeah.
What are these? What are the epics you speak of?
So usually what's going to happen is once per storyline, like Tyranny of Dragons.
Yeah.
There will be a start-off event that's going to be multi-table, big deal at a major convention. That's a special adventure. And so the one we just ran was called Corruption in Crypt Garden.
Yeah.
And in Crypt Garden Forest, this very powerful dragon was starting to become allied with various groups. And it'll run elsewhere, so I'm not going to spoil what happens and what the players go through. But the adventurers, the different factions called forth adventurers to investigate this threat and end it. And you cannot slay a dragon such as this one, so that was not something they could do. Okay. But they could do a number of things around this stronghold that was being put together by these allied forces of evil. And it was really exciting because as one group does something, it affects the other groups that are in different tracks of the adventure. And so it was neat to kind of have a person come up to the central headquarters table and say, our table just did this, we took out a siege engine. And then you could say, we've crossed that threshold. All right, folks, the siege engine stopped firing on all the other tables.
Right.
And everybody goes, oh, God. The undead stop rising because the necromancers have been defeated. Those kinds of things. So those were big deals that felt very visceral to the players.
Sure.
And even when they're playing, they know I've got to accomplish this objective so that other tables benefit from it.
Sure. You got any idea how many people got involved with the Avengers League stuff this year?
I don't.
At Gen Con? I know, so you haven't got
Yeah,
any
I
figures,
don't. I know
you've
that
been hanging around the area an awful lot, haven't you? You've probably seen an awful lot of people coming in.
Yeah, we had close to 100 tables at the Epic itself,
yeah,
which is a big number of tables. And it's very popular right now at gaming stores, this convention. But it's hard to count because a lot of people just come in and play once, and they might, lie dormant for a while and come back and play.
Yeah, cool. Hey, I saw you mention on Twitter you played a bit of Time Watch today.
I did.
How did you find that?
Oh, it was a lot of fun. I was a little worried, the DM was trying to be nice to everybody, and he sat 11 players.
Is that your first time you played it?
It was the first time.
Yeah, I played it for the first time yesterday. Was it? Yeah, yesterday morning.
Oh, nice.
Kevin ran the game.
Oh, great.
That was such a blast. I really am glad I backed that Kickstarter.
Me too. Me too. I got to play it and had a lot of fun. It was an all-female PCs, and we were from various eras in time. Agatha Christie was revealed as a megalomaniac.
Which adventure was that?
The adventure was
maybe different to the one.
It was the Tunguska forest explosion, and we were trying to figure out what the robots that are trying to destroy Tunguska were about.
We had dinosaurs taking over the world by wiping out creative minds. That was fantastic. Anyway,
Sounds
it was an
awesome.
absolute pleasure. I think
Yeah.
I now know what the D&D Adventurers League is. Finally.
Well, and we've got a thread on the forums on Ian World.
Yeah, you absolutely do have.
So,
Now when I go and reread that thread, I can understand what it means.
good. I hope so.
Yeah.
And you know, I think the biggest thing is that it's an opportunity for people to come out and just play D&D,
Sure.
or with other programs, you know, whatever the game may be.
So what we could do is when we get this up on YouTube, we can whack that into that thread, because I think it'll make quite a
Cool.
good little intro for those people who
Yeah.
sort of like me didn't quite grasp
Right.
what the whole thing was. Anyway, thanks so much. Absolute
Hey, it's
pleasure.
a pleasure. Keep doing the good work.
Thank you.